What's up, Vibers? It is April 29th. That means it is Carbine patch day, baby. So my goal for this video is to first give you an overview of everything that has changed this patch, followed by an in-depth look at all the changes, and all that will be timestamped. So if you're interested in anything after you kind of get the summary at the front here, you can find your way there and check it out. So let's dive right in. This is the quick intro where they're basically saying over the next few months, they're going to be heads down working on the 1.0 full release, which will be hitting later this summer. So in the meantime, they're going to be slowing down some of the bid content. They're still going to be doing balance touches as far as I'm aware. And we see some significant balance changes in this patch along with the brand new Hunter Carbine. So this whole first chunk is just basic information about Carbine. This is a pretty sweet video. If you haven't checked it out, I recommend it. And this is just going through his abilities and what you can get from his Hunter missions. If you're interested in more information on Carbine, I did a full guide on this guy yesterday. So you can either check my channel or I have it linked in the description if you want to jump right there and you're looking for more info. And then getting right into the balance stuff, which we will talk more about in depth. Podracing essentially removed for Oath. So sad day for Oath mains, probably good day for everyone else. I'm honestly not a huge fan of this, and we'll talk about why. Pretty nice looking void buff, increasing the slow on the LMB, increasing the charge damage when you let it reset, as well as a cooldown reduction on the shift. Brall Nerf here, mainly to the ultimate. They're basically adding 2 seconds cooldown reduction to the shift, but then also giving him some dash haste inherent on his passive. So you're going to make up a little bit of this back from the inherent dash haste, but we'll talk more about that. Jin, like pretty big nerf, actually, just a straight up fat chunk taken out of his health pool. Like pretty big numbers here to the health changes, as well as what looks like pretty close to like a second increase on both dashes at most levels. Coming down to Beebo, we finally see a reduction on the bomb damage coming through here. These are actually pretty big numbers though. 20% on the damage and the AP ratio. Joule has this sort of like, I would call these changes more than like a buff or a nerf, because basically they nerfed her duration by half, but then they buffed her warm-up cast time by half. So basically you can do it you can cast it in half the time, but you can only float for half the time. So she loses this ability to kind of like hang out and reset or like wait for allies. Shout out my boy Blue. Very nice Zeph Buffs, actually. So increase the self-healing by 25%. Nice cooldown reduction on the shift, as well as the ability to actually like flick the ultimate significantly more, 33% more. Saros is getting a mana cost reduction on the RMB, as well as it's going to, refund the same amount as well. And the idea here is he should have 4 shots, like without building a mana item instead of 3, I believe. We see a pretty significant nerf coming through to Myth Rain of Arrows, base damage reduction, as well as AP ratio reduction. So those are the balance changes. I'm a little sad about this one, honestly. I thought this Vision addition was really cool, and it doesn't even look like they didn't think it was cool. It's basically saying everyone being able to see more of the chaos is costing server performance or causing, a bit of overload. So hopefully this is something they will eventually be able to solve, and we'll see this get it added back in. But for now, the addition of the 200 range in your little circle here, as well as the addition of the vision on your control cone, has been reverted. They've loosened up the rank restrictions just slightly so that Diamond can queue as silver now instead of just gold. Basically one more down, and then Master can queue with gold down instead of platinum. So basically just, one more in the kind of window of who you can queue with here. And then a slew of bug fixes. Shout out Dylan Jang and Lemur, as well as a bunch of other people who helped track this down. Let's go. There's actually some big ones here. So you can no longer do touch triggers off of allies. So this crazy Beebo bomb touch interaction should no longer work with like any of the touch spells. They fixed this bug where you could drop the boombox after you cast it, and new people that came in wouldn't get applied to them. This is a big change, like actually like sort of shadow nerf to Saros, because I was always really confused why you couldn't see Saros's aiming laser on his R&B. And it looks like now you are going to be able to see it. And so like it's funny, like when I said in my guide, I just assumed that you were going to be able to see this, so I suggested you get good at flicking the R&B. And so now if you play Saros, you're actually going to want to get good at flicking the R&B because it's going to be similar to Strike Shot, Ghost Laser, everything else that has, sort of that visual prediction for enemies. Like enemies are now going to be able to see your R&B shot, it looks like. Eva's orbs should be taking less damage, like behaving normally. That's good for Eva's. You shouldn't lose quest chests to Abyss if you're floating anymore. And then an interesting change to falling. You no longer have air control while stunned to fix issues where hunters could still WASD while crowd controlled. And then finally, some nice quality of life settings. You can now pick the same hunter while chilling in lobby, so you guys can like both look at, Carbine, for example, at the same time, instead of it just saying unlucky. And then in hunter select, one of you will have to switch off. And then they added push to talk. It looks like the, independent team and party push to talk are now just like the same button, not unique inputs. So I assume that means same button. So you just have one push to talk button. You don't have to worry about which one is what. I don't know why this is QoL down here, but this is like a Saros buff. So Saros getting sort of like nerfed in the bug fixes and then buffed in the QoL here. He is getting gonna be able to do damage to destructibles with his Q, like we saw Ghost changes the Ghost ultimate and stuff to do that the other patch. But this is really good, and this should mean Oath Shield. So you should be able to Saros Q Oath Shield now. And then finally, you're gonna actually be able to see when people die to Abyss. In the kill feed, it'll say Abyss instead of just World, and the geysers are louder. All right, so that is our summary. And now we're just going to kind of go through and look at anything relevant here. So we talked about the Carbine stuff. Already have a guide for that. So we're diving right into the balance changes here, starting with Oath. So you can, I was never very good at it, but you can no longer pod race. And I understand why they would change this, but they've left it in for so long. Like if they were going to remove this, like, I don't know, it should have happened a long time ago. They should have made an adjustment. Like, why not adjust it when you were adjusting the Zeph stuff, like the Zeph B-hop, right? And why not just put like the thing about it is like, I know it's really strong, and I know there's a lot of Oath haters out there, but for those that do play Oath, like this is just a literal nerf to the fun of the character. And that's just not cool. Like, it's just not fun. And I know it's not necessarily fun to play against infinite mobility Oath, but my suggestion would be something more along the lines of like a dampener with like the Zeph B-hop or something, where they could still get some element of the mechanic. There was maybe still some advantage to use it, but it wasn't so crazy that you could, catch the train, as they say, or like whatever, right? Yeah, and I guess my point is just that, like, once you give players a mechanic and they kind of have it unlocked and they've been practicing it for months and months, it feels absolutely terrible to just hard pull it like this. And like, yeah, maybe it makes the character more overall balanced, but I think there is another way to like achieve this, I guess. Taking a look at the Void buffs, I'm actually a pretty big fan of these. I think Void's kind of like this closet pick where I don't think he's necessarily weak. I just think there's not that many people that understand how to play him, because every once in a while you'll run into that Void main that's just absolutely cracked and does some crazy stuff. But I do kind of like seeing him get some love. And so basically, it looks like his LMB is going to be significantly stronger here, where he's not only going to get an additional slow on hit when he connects it, when he gets his big one. So basically on Void, with his LMB here, the gravity orb, see this bottom part? After not firing for a brief period, your next shot is charged. Charge shot deals 280 base damage now, up from 265, with also a bigger AP ratio. We see 28% here, up from 26.8%. And not too long ago, remember, they made the change where the charged shot will pass through walls and the uncharged shot won't. So it's basically, like most Void mains are very comfortable at this like reset timing, kind of knowing when the laser gets big again to get the charge shot. And it's going to be even better now because you're going to have more base damage, more AP scaling, as well as a bigger slow. We also see a pretty nice cooldown reduction added to the shift. So we're going to get a second off at each level, it looks like. Yeah, so a second reduction at level 1 from 10 to 9. Level 2 is 8.5 to 7.5. And then level 3 and 4 are, down a second from 7 to 6. Taking a look at our boy Brall here, it says Brall continues to disproportionately benefit from trios even after adjustments to mana and knock resets. We think it's appropriate to bring down some of his mobility and uptime on his ultimate. On the flip side, we still want successful Brall mains to feel rewarded, which is why we're putting Dash Haste back in his passive. So this is like an interesting change where they're they're adding cooldown to his shift, like pretty significant, 2 seconds. So 2 seconds at level 1, 2 seconds at level 2, 2 seconds at level 3, and 2 seconds. Yeah, so it's 2 seconds across the board on all levels, which is putting our level 4 like max cooldown at 8 seconds here, right? But then we're also getting 12% dash haste added into Blazing Spirit. And so we're getting some amount of what we just lost here back from this. And it's not a crazy amount, but like, for example, a 10% of 8 is 0.8, right? You just move the decimal over 1. And so 12% of 8 is just like maybe 0.9 or just a little over 0.8, right? Yeah, I just calculated it and it's 0.96, right? So we're basically, this is actually a second less, basically a full second less off of this 12% dash A. So this is 7. So it's kind of weird what, is happening here. Yeah, so, nerf with like a bit of recovery here, but definitely an overall nerf. And then coming down to the ultimate, the biggest nerf of this is going to be this first chunk. Just this flat cooldown increase happening to the R, and it's really going to be sort of affecting the power scaling where here it's going to be 5 seconds off the front, but then it's going to be 10 seconds longer, like at level 2, sort of like in the mid game. And then in the end, your final level is going to be 5 seconds longer than it was. So before it had this sort of jump from 35 to 25, and then it just stayed the same, level 2 to level 3, right? That's sort of increased by 5 and then spread out as well. And then these two changes aren't really that big. They're basically doing the same kind of idea where they're slowing down his power curve a bit, but in the end, they're the same. We can see here, level 3 is the same, 190 as the base damage, as well as the AP ratio being the same, 0.9 at the end. So it's not really an overall nerf to Brawl in endgame. It's slowing his power scaling a bit, where the only changes here are level 1 base damage is down 30, and then level 2, our AP ratio is down 0.1 from 0.9 to 0.8. And basically they're doing the same thing here and here, what they did here, where instead of having these jumps, it's 160, 160, 190, and here it's 0.7, 0.9, 0.9. Now it's going to be sort of scaled throughout the levels as you would sort of expect, everything to kind of scale with the level. We're not exactly sure why it was like this way before, right? All right, taking a look at Jin here. He just got a fatty health pool hit. So base health down 100, health per level decreased. And so this is going to result in a max health decrease of, what is that, like a little over 300? Pretty significant. So going to be a more squishy Jin. We can see right here that number. If I don't have, any health or anything, I have exactly that number, 1,555. And then combined with the health decrease, he is also getting roughly a second added to every portion of his dash. Like every level of his dash is getting a second. So the mini dash, just the little ground one here, it's up a second pretty much across the board here. Yeah, so 6 to 7 at level 1, 5.5 to 6.5 at level 2, 5 to 6 at level 3, and 4.5 to 5.5 at level 4. If we take a look at the air dash, it's a pretty similar thing, except a second and a half added. So it's basically a second added to the ground dash, a second and a half added to the air dash, where we can see level 1 jumped from 11 to 12.5, then level 2 is 10 to 11.5, then 9 to 10.5, and then 8 to 9.5 at max. All right, and then getting to Beebo, this is basically just a lowering of the bomb damage. And Beebo also he had some crazy touch tech he could do in the bug fixes down here. This is a Beebo nerf, even though these effects maybe were unintended. You could do, this was an allied minion, and so you could do touch spells with it. So touch of speed, touch of health, touch of mana. You could, anytime you touch your bomb, it would proc, and so you could just like power touch by doing this. And so that shouldn't work anymore. So the main thing happening here is, yeah, just the damage reduction on the big B-bomb here. So it's going to be base damage lowered by 20% from, so top end 350 is going to be down to 280. And then the AP ratio lowered by 20% as well. So top end 2.44 to 1.95. These are big numbers, right? So you're going to definitely notice both Beebo mains and people that Beebo are playing against are definitely going to be, noticing this bomb damage, because 20% on both of these is definitely going to add up. All right, taking a look at Joule. It says, Joule's been struggling since the changes to her dash. Larger options are currently being explored. Potential bigger rework getting hinted at here. But in the meantime, it felt appropriate to make her ultimate feel good to use again. We didn't like the output of the extended hover and option select, but we do want Joule mains to feel like lightning, especially if they can call their shot. So basically what they're doing here, it's definitely not a buff or a nerf. It's sort of a change. I would call it a change. I basically, depending on your perspective and how you like to play Joule and how you use the ultimate, could change whether you view it as a buff or a nerf. But in general, you know, they're adding something and they're taking something away by equal percentages. So the hover duration is halved. So you're only going to be able to spend half as much time as in the air. But the warm-up cast time is also halved. So it's going to take you less time to get into the air. So we take a look at it here. We sort of instantly shoot up, like very fast, right? But look at how short we stay up here, right? If I don't do anything, we're sort of like instantly out of it. Even though we no longer have like the iframe on the way up, we're going to be able to cast it up and get the ignore projectiles like right away. But you're basically going to have to kind of like decide or know where you're going right away too, right? Where if you wait even just like a second to decide, you're down. Literally less than a second. 0.75 seconds is how long you have to decide. So, but it's going to give you the ability to like up down much faster, or it should at least, right? That's the idea. Like the feel like lightning part. All right, looking at Zeph. Zeph got some nice buffs here, man. Says we want more reliability and survivability for Zeph in the Trios world. These changes are targeted at improving Zeph's self-sufficiency in terms of healing, mobility, and peel. And they definitely will. So self-healing increased by 25% from 50 up to 75 on our Mending Breeze here, which we're definitely going to feel. Looks like 1.5 second reduction across the board here on the shift. And so at max level, it's going to be down to 7.5 seconds from 9. And so definitely going to be feeling that. Basically like, you know, free quick blade. And then this one's pretty cool, actually. Yaw rotation increased. I always thought the yaw on Zeph's ult did feel kind of like a little too locked in. So you're basically going to be able to 33% increase. You're going to be able to swing the ulti, like flick it 33% better if this math is adding up. And so you should be able to like, you know, charge the ultimate and kind of like pivot it quite a bit more than you could before and mix things up. All right, switching over to Saros here. Basically, his shot got changed from 100 to 75, and it also refunds 75 instead of 100 now, which you know, basically makes it so it gives it all of its mana back still. And so what this is going to do is, like, right now, Saros basically has 3 shots in the chamber. Saros is unique in that none of his abilities cost mana except his RMV. And so, like, you can basically do everything in his kit with no mana cost. And there's a couple things like when you get ionized, like hitting that, or if you portal, that are going to give you inherent mana gen pretty big from the ionize effect. So the only thing that costs mana is the big snipe shot, and with it costing 100 mana before and the base mana pool being 300, we basically had 3 shots of it, right? And so this change should make it so you have 4 shots in a full mana pool. So if you hit a shot, you get it back, so that you can definitely take more than 4 shots in a row, but you have to be hitting your shots. You can have 4 misses in a row now, as we can see down here in the bottom left. I'm now at exactly 0 mana, but remember, I can still do everything else, and I can do stuff to try to get ionized to get this back quicker. And we still have the 4-second rule happening, where after 4 seconds, you know, even doing nothing, the passive regen is going to kick in, and we're going to get a lot of that back. So we can't R&B, you know, we can still LMB and do literally everything else. But basically, we have 4 shots to miss instead of 3, and so just going to be slightly less punishing if you're not able to connect your R&B shots is the idea. And that's all that's mentioned with Saros right here, but we talked about it at the beginning. He also has a change in bug fixes, which is really a nerf. And then he has another change in quality of life, which is actually a buff. And so basically your aim laser for this thing is going to be visible to enemies now. So you're going to want to, similar to like Shrike, you're going to want to sort of flick it now, where like, you know, or like Ghost Laser, there's a lot of things that are like this, where there's essentially a prediction, right? Where if you're doing this, an enemy can now see my aim laser. So if an enemy's standing here and I'm doing this, they're going to, it's literally like a sniper, right? They're going to see my freaking laser on them, and they're going to be like, they're going to know they need to sidestep here. So the best way to hit people now is going to be essentially flicking onto them, because same thing with, you know, Shrike auto, same thing with the Ghost Q. you are essentially wanting to not give people time to predict that it's going to be there. And so you're going to be wanting to, you know, essentially like pivot it and try to flick it a lot more onto people. And then this change is actually pretty big here, where your Q is actually going to do destructible damage. So trees, walls, and also I believe Oath Shield is a destructible. So if before it wasn't, your Q should now be doing damage to Oath Shield. So this throwing this out to a zoning Oath and like punching through it with a shot should give you, you know, significant damage chunk into that shield. All right, taking a look at Myth, it says, we like the outputs of Rain of Arrows, but it probably shouldn't be the single best zoning ability in the game, given Myth's other outputs. We're bringing the damage down to account for it. So everything's going to be the same, except the flat damage is going to be down pretty significant here, 80 to 55 at max level. As well as, you know, similar reductions at level 1 and 2. And then we also have a little decrease to the AP ratio here, where it's going to be pretty much the same at level 1, and then a little weaker at level 2, and then significantly weaker at level 3, 0.36 down to 0.3. So just like the Beebo bomb, these two things together, you're definitely going to feel, people playing against Myth and people playing as Myth are definitely going to feel at least a little bit of damage coming off the Q here. You know, and probably justified. It is a crazy good zoning tool, and the anti-heal, and especially if you know, max it, getting the width and the CDR on it can be pretty oppressive. All right, so those are the balance changes. Getting down to this vision change, I talked about it at the beginning a little bit, but I'm pretty bummed about this. I'm really hoping they're able to add this back in at some point, because they're not removing it for any, you know, balance reason. It's literally getting removed for server performance. So you can imagine 40 people in a game, well, now 36, right? All of them, you know, being able to see what's around them, and all that having like a performance cost. If everyone can see 200 wider, as well as their cone being able to see 500 further, there's basically like more getting visually processed for every single player. So more times 36. And I guess that is having a significant effect on server performance. And so for now, like I say, hopefully, you know, as they move to 1.0 and stuff, maybe they're able to resolve this and add this extra vision back in, because I thought this extra vision was a really nice change, and it really opened up the claustrophobia a little bit. Like, this is a really small vision cone if you consider how, you know, kind of much territory you could actually see when you like control out. And it was nice to be able to essentially have control vision to the edge of your screen, especially if you have the cam options on where your screen pans. Like, you could see, like, you know, pretty much it was nice getting the extra intel when you were looking to scout, and it was nice just feeling a little less claustrophobic with this like small circle being a little wider. So yeah, hopefully, you know, we'll get that back at some point, but for now it's going to get reverted to the original for the sake of the servers. Take a look at the ranked restrictions. This is literally just, you know, widening the window a little bit and like talking about it being attached to the, I'll just read it. For 0.27, what is this? Is this the patch number? Is it? Like, there hasn't been any real patch numbers. Yeah, this is the only indication that this is a 0.27 patch. I wish they did do numbers like this. So for this patch, we are widening hook and Q together. Our main motivation originally was to prevent high skill players from making smurfs to reduce Q times and get easier matches, allowing an effective way to boost accounts. Now that ranked isn't unlocked to level 23, we can walk this back and make sure we aren't preventing friends from playing together. So all this is doing really is just widening the window by one rank. So diamond, instead of the bottom of who you can queue with being gold, it's now going to be silver. And if you're master, it's the same exact thing, where you're going to be able to queue an extra rank down. So instead of platinum being the lowest you can queue with, it is now going to be gold. All right, coming down to bug fixes here. Starting with fixed a bug that caused in-game missions in custom games with spectators to not drop rewards upon completing missions. That is an annoying bug for players like these guys that are participating in competitive games as well as scrims. And so shout out to the boys here, Dylan, FPS, Jang, Lemur, as well as the dozens of other players who helped Theorycraft track this down. Thank you guys. We see here, which we mentioned with Beebo a little bit, touch powers no longer going to be triggered off of ally minions. And I think that's mainly sort of generated by that touch interaction with the Beebo bomb we were looking at. And then we have this bug fix to the boombox, where essentially what it sounds like before is you could like trigger the boombox, and then if you dropped it, anyone entering that active boombox like wouldn't get it after that. So in theory, you could throw it, and then if I did this, anyone coming in now while it's still up wouldn't get the invuln effect. So that's going to be fixed now. So even if you do, you can't like cheesy drop it like that. But, you know, anyone that enters at any time should get the buff regardless. We already talked about the Saros later in the section with him. Eva, this is a nice change for Evas out there because your orb should work as intended now, where before there were instances where they were receiving double damage or multiple instances of damage from hunters where they shouldn't have. So orbs in general should feel like they last a little longer now because they will not be taking those multiple instances of damage. This is a pretty annoying bug that is getting fixed here. If you're over Abyss when a quest completes, you'll actually get the chest on a ledge somewhere instead of it just disappearing. And then this falling change, you no longer have air control while stunned to fix issues where hunters could still WASD while crowd controlled. And I think like there were some weird interactions where even where people were stunned, they could like still use momentum with in certain cases and still like try to mantle and stuff. And I don't know the specifics or the details on this, but my assumption is that they're basically just trying to fix anything that's sort of unintended, you know, with the way momentum works while getting stunned here. All right, coming down to our final section here in quality of life. Again, I'm not sure why the Saros Q is under QoL. It is quality of life for Saros, I guess. We have some changes to settings where if you are in the same lobby as someone, like in a party, you will be able to select the same hunter. And like, so you could both look at Carbine now, for example, instead of it just saying unlucky for one of you. And now in draft, like when you're actually in game, you can still only pick one per team, right? So someone will have to switch off of them when the game actually starts, but in the lobby, you can, you know, basically look at everyone without having to worry about it. There's this change to push to talk where it says push to talk team and party are not unique inputs to avoid unintentional double binding and your squad hearing the vacuum or your dog. So not unique inputs. Yeah, it looks like, you know, you can still have you can still set one or the other to push to talk or open mic and stuff. So I'm not sure exactly what that means. Just a couple little changes, some clarification in the kill feed. It'll say Abyss when someone falls to the Abyss instead of died to world now. So there will be clarification. As well as geysers being louder. Big win here for this final change. I've been waiting for this one for a while. Finally, we can hear the geysers. Boom. That is it for this one, my friends. I hope that was useful. I hope that kind of brings you up to speed on everything that has changed. I really hope you guys enjoyed Carbine in the new patch, and I will see you out there. With that, I just want to thank you so much for watching. Remind you to take care of yourself and keep vibing. Catch you in the next one. Peace.